of the Russian Orthodox Church is. And anyone who in any manner opposes Russia needs to know that and needs to oppose the Russian Orthodox Church as well, as it has fully and completely become part and parcel of the Russian terrorist regime. That, my friends, is what we see. That is what we can prove. The video speaks for itself, honestly. The behavior of the Russian patriarch speaks for itself. You don't have to take up our words for it. All you have to do is to see for yourself. See how the Russian Orthodox quote-unquote church behaves. See how rotten to the core they have become. See how they sold their soul for power on this earth. I thought the church was supposed to teach people about life everlasting after death, not about bullets and shells and cash in hand and to the pocket. But alas, it seems like we are truly returning to the mentality of the Middle Ages, where you can buy heaven with a little bit of money. Truly, Russia is such a traditionalist country. So traditionalist they are, that they can buy heaven with a few rubles. And that's very cheap, considering the position in which ruble is right now. Ruble to ruble, they say. And hopefully one of these days it's going to fully and completely become worthless. It could have already become that if the free world took Russia at least a little bit more seriously. You know, my friends, it has been said before that Putin wants negotiations without actually wanting to negotiate. Now that sentence might sound like a paradox to you, but it is no paradox. It is a very intelligent sentence. I can't remember exactly the man who said it first, but it is a very good sentence to describe how Putin behaves. Putin wants there to be this perpetual idea, oh, you know, Russia wants negotiations. He wants something in the shape of negotiations to be happening. But he actually does not want to participate in those negotiations whatsoever. He wants to keep this facade that Russia is ready for negotiations, whilst at the same time not being ready to commit to even the minutest of compromises. What are negotiations but an exchange of some compromises? When I come to the store and I ask what's the price of a product that I want, I need to actually pay the money to get that product. That's a negotiation. I'm exchanging my money for what I want, for the product I want. If Russia thinks that it can simply get everything it wants and give nothing in return, then my friends, I'm sorry, but those are not negotiations. That is simple extortion, theft, robbery. That's what it is. Racketeering, perhaps, if you're feeling a little bit more political. But my friends, truth be told, Putin is scared of negotiation. He's scared because he's afraid that he may make a mistake. He wants to make politics in Ukraine epiphenomenal. He wants to make them irrelevant. He wants to show everyone that supposedly there's no politics in Ukraine, but he is wrong. In fact, there are no politics in Russia. The only politics that exists in Russia is the relation between Putin and his dons, the oligarchs that keep his money for him. That's the only kind of politics that exists. Brute force. That's politics in Russia. In Russia, there is no corruption outside of the state. The state itself is the perpetrator, the center of that corruption. It is endemic in every part and parcel of life. But of course, my friends, of course, people aren't really talking about that. People aren't really talking about what they should be talking about. And they should be talking about what's the best way to finally put the Russian terrorist regime down for good. That should be the objective, the end step, the end goal in all of these conversations, all of these negotiations between the allies in the free world. That should be what they are discussing. But it's not yet. But hopefully we'll get there one day, my friends. Hopefully. Would you like to ask a question, my friend?
This country is corrupt.
This country, the United Kingdom.
Yes, it is.
How so?
Our country uses children
Abuses children
and then covers it up.
and covers it up.
Social workers abuse children. Police act criminally.
Let's talk about children.
Judiciary act unjust.
Let's talk about children then. You know, my friend, I'm not going to.
You've got no
I got your
business
point.
being in my country.
I got not what?
Acting, you've got no business talking about corruption of the
No, you said being. You said being in my country.
in my country.
Yeah, I have no business being in your country. I have bad news for you. I'm a British citizen.
No, talking
I have very bad news for you, my
I'll
friend.
finish my sentence.
Well, you already started making assumptions.
In my country, talking about other countries
Indeed.
being corrupt.
Indeed.
This country that you're using as a platform is corrupt itself.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
You know, my friends, I would like to thank you for coming here, for interacting with us a little bit. I got your point. Listen, my friend, I got your point. Let me answer your point. I got your point. Let me answer your point. We are not, listen, we are always inviting the crowd to interact with us, but we don't invite the crowd to start filibustering for the whole day. So I got your point, now I'm going to answer. So this country is corrupt, you say. Where are you going? Where are you going? Oh, let's speak about children. Let's speak about the thousands of children Russia has kidnapped from Ukraine. Let's speak about how Russia is turning those children into a new generation of cattle fodder, of meat. Do people do that in this country? No, they don't. You, my friend, are an ungrateful individual. You have no idea what kind of a good quality of life you have in this great country. But alas, such is the behavior of traitors. Such is the behavior of ignorant people who do not understand the good quality of life they have. Such is the behavior of useful idiots who support the Russian terrorist regime. And when we criticize it, they come to us and say, oh, you know, this country is corrupt. Let's talk about the example we made so long ago once again then. Let's talk about that. So there are many different kinds of thieves in this world. One kind of a thief is a pickpocket. Somebody who walks around the street and, well, steals from your pocket. Another kind of thief is somebody, imagine a child in a kindergarten, who steals some candy from the other kid. It's still stealing, so technically you could call that a thief. Another kind of a thief is somebody who robs a whole country of their livelihood, of their future, of their very dignity, and then claims he was right in doing as such. All of those kinds of thieves, my friends, are completely different from each other. To say that it's all thieves and they're all the same is absolutely idiotic. It's a grievous misrepresentation of what being a thief means. And we are here, my friends, to show you the difference between those things. How are you guys? Doing well. You know, some lovely people passing by here. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free. We just had another individual pass by us, but unfortunately he did not wait for me to answer his question. Very unfortunate. And you know, I hope you guys are having a nice day. Don't lose your mom. Very, very important. This is a big city, you know. London is a very big city. It's very important for you guys to always, know where your mom is. I remember my niece one time when we were in Lisbon. She got a little bit angry with my sister, and she just picked up her stuff and walked off. My sister was very angry, and rightfully so, you know. Lisbon is a considerable city, but it's nothing compared to London. Lisbon has less than 1 million people. London has more than 12 million at this moment. But again, my friends, I'll come back to this very fun individual who came here a while ago and started talking about corruption in this country. I mean, whoever says that there's zero corruption in their country, whatever that country might be, is either a fool or is lying for a purpose. No country has no corruption, not a single one. And even if there was a country that has no corruption, it would be impossible to extrapolate as much. It would be absolutely impossible for you to know that it has zero corruption, because you don't have all of the information needed for that. So we don't deal in absolutes here. We deal in realistic relatives. What's the realistic relative for this country, my friends? This country is not without problems. Yes, there is corruption. Yes, there is a certain level of poverty. Yes, there are problems. Sometimes bad problems, grievous problems. Not too long ago, we had a big issue in terms of the riots in this country. A few posts on Twitter and some other social media were enough to whip a whole bunch of people from the drunk right into a frenzy, to go into the streets, to start attacking the police, throwing bricks at them, besieging people who they thought were to blame for something that they did not even understand. It was really pathetic what happened. But alas, my friends, we continue to live, we continue to try to expose those lies spread by the enemies of this country, spread by the Russian terrorist regime, and many of their allies, like Ayatollah Iran, North Korea, and yes, the CCP. Let's not forget about the CCP, my friends. The CCP at the moment is not a direct and immediate enemy of this country, but it is backing the direct and immediate enemies this country has right now. That needs to be said. Russia is the most direct, most immediate enemy of the United Kingdom. Ayatollah Iran is a close second. We need to put Russia down for good, for that to be a future for Europe. Brexit was a big mistake. I don't know if we can go back on that mistake ever. Just yesterday I signed a petition to try to get the United Kingdom back into the EU. I think it could be still doable, potentially. But let's face it, exactly, it will be very difficult. And the United Kingdom, you know what's the problem? What's the main problem, Jan? The main problem is the United Kingdom will most likely never get the privileges it had before, when it was part of the EU. It had special treatment. But fools and people who are snake oil salesmen misinform the people of this country. And they told them, oh, you know, migration, it's all the EU's fault, it's all the EU's fault. And some people believe them. You know why? Because the people who know better did not bother explaining it properly. The people who are fools, oftentimes, speak the most loudly. And that needs to change, my friends. People who know need to speak up. They need to let their voice be heard. If they don't, they may not have a voice very soon. That is why we are here today, my friends. To invite people to have their voice be heard here, even if it's our opposition, and to let people know how we can stop this war started and escalated by the Russian terrorist regime. Together. All together, we will win.
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 Fight the jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
Long-range missiles 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 for Ukraine.
Let Ukraine strike back.
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 Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much. You know, my friend, we need to always tell people what's going on. And we need to always listen to people when they have something to say in response to that. Where it is to support us or to oppose us. That is one of the main values of this country. Freedom of expression. That is something we all respect and we all uphold. But there needs to be decorum in the conversation. And everybody needs to know their place in that conversation, my friends. I guess the individual who came to us a while ago today, who started trying to argue a little bit, you know, like around a half an hour ago, you remember him. I guess he expected us to just let him speak for an hour or so and filibuster the whole rally. That is not what we are offering. We're not offering our opposition to fully take over our spot here and start spreading their garbage. That's not what we're offering. We are offering a chance for our opposition to ask a question and to have that question immediately answered. In fact, if they want, they can ask more than one question. That's perfectly fine too. But my friends, what we are not offering is for people to just start using that and abusing that. And to start talking and talking and talking and talking. I mean, it's amazing how many people with a big ego come here and try to completely take over the space because we give them the chance to ask a question. I remember that individual who came here to the middle and started doing push-ups on the floor. I'm sure some of you remember it. You know, I see Sean remembers it. He was a funny guy, wasn't he? Just some absolute nutcase comes here, starts riding on the floor, and then starts doing push-ups randomly. I mean, I guess it's good that he was keeping himself in good shape. That's good, that's respectable. But my friends, you know what was funny about that individual? Is that when he came here, I wasn't the one doing the speech, it was another one of our speakers. When he came here and tried to get the microphone from that speaker, I came near him and I approached him as an equal, on his level, on the ground. And I asked him, my friend, would you like to ask a question? What is it that you would like to say? You know what he did? He ignored me. He didn't want to speak to someone without a microphone. That was beneath him. What he wanted to do was to come here, to get the microphone, and then to start spewing out the garbage, a whole river of sewage, out for the ears of anyone who would hear it. That's what he wanted. But alas, my friends, that's not what we're offering here. We are offering here an opportunity to engage in a productive discussion for those who support us to join us and to add their voice to ours. For those who oppose us, to let their opinion be known and let their reasoning be known. But my friends, let's face it, their reasoning is stupid. That's how it is. Now, I'm not going to say it in the face of people who come here to show us a different opinion. No, we need to be respectful. But truth be told, if somebody comes to you and says that 2 plus 2 is 5, I'm sorry, my friends, or 4 plus 4 is 9. That's not something that anyone in the right state of mind should say, my friends. No. And this is not a conversation about maths. This is a conversation about simple logic, reality, what's happening around us. I remember not too long ago seeing a post of some quote-unquote Ukrainian supporter. I have my questions about that. That didn't look like a Ukrainian supporter to me. She put a picture of a bunch of people with amputated arms and legs, and she said something of the sort of, oh, you know, this is the price of joining NATO. What a stupid comment to make. Absolutely idiotic. I really hope that people see through that kind of stuff. Because my
Когда
friends,
Путину лучше выпить
Ukraine
чай с новичком.
is not in NATO. It was not allowed to join NATO. And if Ukraine was allowed to join NATO, none of this would have ever happened. It would have never been invaded. Look how many times the Russian terrorist regime invaded its neighbors. Look how many times the Russian terrorist regime invaded NATO members. Do you know how many? Any guesses? It's zero. They have not invaded a NATO country even once throughout their whole history of complaining and moaning about NATO. They keep doing it all the time, but they've never invaded them. Although they say, oh, it's a big threat for us, it's a big threat. Well, why aren't you facing off against that threat directly? I'll tell you why. Because Russia has the mentality of a bully. It only faces those countries who it sees as completely and utterly incapable of fighting back. As the saying goes, pick on someone your own size. Well, Russia picked on Ukraine. And even against Ukraine, Russia was unable to get the victory they were promising to the whole world. 3 days, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. It was all a bunch of nonsense. My friends, it's been more than 3 years now. In fact, I lied. It's been ever since 2014. Ever since 2014, this war has been going on in the Donbass. And look at Ukraine now. All this time, and some people still don't understand that Russia is not going to stop in Ukraine. All this time, and some people still don't understand that if Ukraine falls, then there will be a direct confrontation with Russia, sooner or later. Russia is not going to stop in Ukraine. Even if they conquered every inch of Ukraine, they will not stop there. It would never satisfy them. If they only wanted Ukraine, think about it. They would have taken their troops out of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, out of Belarus, out of Moldova. They would have done it long ago. Out of Syria even. There's still Russian troops in Syria now, as we speak. There's still Russian bases there. And it's time for those bases to be erased off the face of the earth. It's time for Russia to learn its place in the grand scheme of things. It's time to make Russia small again. That, my friends, is the final objective, the best case scenario for the whole world, including for the Russians themselves. And that is what we are here to talk about. More sanctions on Russia.
More sanctions on Russia!
More sanctions on Russia.
More sanctions on Russia!
More sanctions on Russia.
More sanctions on Russia!
Seize Russian assets.
Seize Russian assets!
Seize Russian assets.
Seize Russian assets!
Seize Russian assets.
Seize Russian assets!
Tribunal for Russian war criminals.
Tribunal for Russia war criminals!
Tribunal for Russian war criminals.
Tribunal for Russia war criminals!
Tribunal for Russian war criminals.
Tribunal for Russia war criminals!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Stop Russia, stop the war.
Stop Russia, stop the war!
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace!
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace!
Help Ukraine protect peace.
Help Ukraine protect peace!
You know what else is funny, my friends? There's been a very funny event that happened in Budapest around a week ago. I believe it's something called something close to a dignity protest or some kind of a pride protest, but not your usual pride protest, my friends. No, no, no. This one is different. This one involves a bunch of neo-Nazis coming to the street with swastikas to start spreading their own pride in what they are. But my friends, the problem is, there's nothing to be proud in being a Nazi. There's nothing to be proud in being a communist, a socialist, a fascist. There's nothing to be proud in being any of these things. In fact, there's plenty to be ashamed of if you are one of those groups of people. But those individuals came out to the streets with all their little swastikas, and some of them came with a different symbol used in a fascist regime. Can you guess what that symbol was?
Nora Muhammad, hello.
It was a
Salam
Z,
alaikum.
a Russian Z, a bunch of Colorado beetle ribbons too. Russian flags were there also. The so-called denazifying country came out to the streets hand to hand with the Nazis. How interesting. And Hungary, of all places, with Viktor Orban and its prime minister, who keeps agreeing and parroting the Russian propaganda that, oh, Ukraine is corrupt, oh, Ukraine is full of Nazis. What did he do about it? Did he make comment on all of these swastika-wearing freaks coming out to the streets? Did he condemn them? Did he go out to the street? Did he send the police to disperse this rally? No, he did nothing. Heroem Slava, thank you very much, my friend. Thank you very much. What a lovely gentleman. My friends, I think it's safe to say, I don't think I need to inform anyone of this, that Nazism is a failed ideology. I know I'm Captain Obvious, I'm Sherlock Holmes, I shouldn't even be saying this, everybody should know this without anyone saying it. But it seems like nowadays, this information is not so clear after all. You know, I find one thing particularly funny about American politics. Some of the people who call themselves American conservatives and American patriots coming out to the streets, and ironically, with a Confederate flag. That is the thing I will never in a million years understand. How can it be that wearing the insignia of a country that was at war with yours and had lost that war makes you a patriot of your country? How does it work? I don't know. It's the same as someone in Ukraine would call themselves a conservative and a patriot and then would go to the streets with a Russian flag.
Saudi Arabia,
It's kind of the same thing.
Nora Muhammad, salam alaikum.
My friends, nobody in their right mind should be sporting a Confederate flag. And even worse is to be sporting a swastika, especially considering what happened in Hungary and in many other places in Europe because of the Nazis. It seems like humanity has learned nothing. Instead of seeing reality as it is and condemning the Russian terrorist regime as a Nazi sympathizing regime, we believe in this idiotic point that, oh, you know, Ukraine is full of Nazis. What kind of idiocy is this? We need to look at actions, not listen to words. And the actions are clear. Every single country that supports Russia seems to have a suspiciously high amount of neo-Nazis who roam around freely and say whatever they want to say, as they want. Now, my friends, it needs to be known that the Nazis are not the only threat. On the opposite side of the political spectrum, there's communists and socialists. How are you, my friend? Would you like to ask a question? No? That's fair. I believe he asked a question here. If you ladies feel like, explaining to us, he's, I don't know, maybe he's just not feeling like repeating himself. But my friends, I'd like to say once again, as I did before, that we always welcome people to ask a couple of questions. And we
Что
will
тут
answer them.
происходит?
So,
Мы
anyone
делим
remember
русские
what he said?
земли.
Anyone heard it? No? Not quite? That's fine. Huh? Oh, what did he say then? In 2003. 2003. What does 2003 stand for? Can anyone inform me? I mean, you see, this is the reason why it would be nice for the people who participate to actually stop and participate properly. Like what happened in 2003? Maybe the chat of box knows it.
First Maidan, 1 year before.
The first Maidan, right. But hold on, what does that have to do with the war though?
Тимошенко.
What does that have to do with the war? I mean, sure, Maidan happened at that time, but what does it have to do with war?
There was a war in 2003, we know what was happening.
In Ukraine? Not in Ukraine for sure. Not even the war in Georgia was happening in 2003. What is that man even talking about? He's probably, I don't know, he's probably confused with 2014 or something, when the war started. You know, I can't get in the head of all of these Russophiles without them actually saying something proper. I mean, maybe I'll read a couple of comments here from Vitaly, but I don't really want to do that because those stingy bastards, they refuse to pay their due to have their question read. We said already that we would read some of those questions and we would answer if they paid for the stream, but they refuse to. They just want to have their garbage opinion heard without doing anything in return, not going to work. Not going to work. If you would like to donate, go right ahead and ask your questions. But for the people who come here, the rules are different. For them, they can ask whatever they like. We will answer. Because that, my friends, is freedom of expression. And that is one of the main values of this country. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
Slava naciji!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть!
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава!
Pavlom has asked me to tell a couple of words about, he was mentioning it, what happened in the Baltic states, in Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia during the last 4 or 5 days. It's basically, it is an important thing for whole of the European continent. It is about independence and freedom, and this time it was energy independence. So on Saturday and Sunday, these 3 Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, totally disconnected from the BREL network. And BREL stands for Belarus, Russia, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. So even when for 2 decades already Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia are members of NATO and members of the EU, one of those negative legacies of the Soviet rule was that the electricity network, the synchronization of the whole electricity network was linked with Russia and Belarus, and it was not that easy to untangle from it, but it was not impossible, and that's what these countries did. So actually Ukraine managed to do this, to disconnect itself from the Russian electricity network in early 2022, just before the full-scale invasion of Russian army, and actually that helped Ukraine a lot, being linked with electricity with the Western European countries and the Central European countries to withstand during the first weeks and months of the invasion and the war. So this is what we did in the Baltics. Pavlo mentioned a little bit, and that's an interesting point, about the hybrid attacks and psychological operations which Russia tried against these 3 European countries weeks before this disconnection of electricity from the Russian rail grid. There were thousands upon thousands of bots sent for sure from the factories of bots in St. Petersburg and other parts of Russia, trying to sway the opinion, particularly of the minorities, of Russian-speaking minorities in Estonia and Latvia, less so in Lithuania, because the percentage of Russians living in
Так,
Lithuania is
Саша,
quite low. But in Latvia
Саша
and Estonia, where,
Пропусков. Мы тут делим русские земли.
is native Russian speakers. They were bombarded with messages of
Олександр Власов, вітаю. Доброго вечора. Ми з України.
Your electricity prices will jump enormously. You will pay from your own pocket. All these scare stories which have no truth in them at all. These countries had prepared that there would be no price shocks. Actually, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia was not buying any electricity from Russia for many years. So it's just sort of disconnecting from the
Вернемся на Батьківщину, как идут оккупационные войска.
Got scared of those. So there was a lot of work by the authorities in those 3 countries.
Так уже поделили, уже суд же не ваш. Родную гавань суд же вернулась. Отделилась от России. Хера вы, Россия немає своих земель. Трамп, Валерий Трамп из Руслан Гитлер капут. Тупой, никуда ты не вернешься, крыса. Подожди, там где про крысу. Лекер или так тебе Батяра и Донбасс не нужен, ты его на карте не покажешь. Да вообще похер, там еще Польша уже забрала Запад, куда ты вернешься? Пусть Польша берет Запад, значит это Запад и станет НАТО и Евросоюзом. Ничего, это очень хорошо даже. Автор лицо. Да, 4 области на одну случай, бред. Луганск. Как вы, суки, заебались, уже, блядь.
Slovakia has other ways to get its energy from. The same comes to Hungary. Yes, at
Там
some
перемалывать. Ну,
point,
перемалывать, но вы уже полгода перемалываете. Пока что Ахмат сила идет назад.
The Baltic states on quite a big scale is the wind energy, the solar. We are not the sunniest countries in Europe. We are
Нам
not
нужны
Europe,
земли
but still,
там, где вы не сможете нас
the new
достать.
generation of solar panels, they can produce energy when there is no sun, when there is just a bright day, basically. And so those here stories by Orban or Fico about Europe's permanent dependency on Russia's oil and gas is
Значит,
just a
идите в ад.
fiction. It's actually
А
not
дужи
true.
ваши
And
под
that
миллион
is what
людей.
was proved
Пентагон
during the
устроил
last
войну.
decade
Пентагон
or so
Стас Михайлов
by
не
the
бомбит Украину.
three countries which were actually, occupied by the
Скоро вам
USSR,
жрать много
Lithuania,
ничего не
Latvia, and
будет.
Estonia.
Мы все переедем в Москву. С Лондона уже есть прямые поезда в Москву. Так, Дима чуть-чуть отдохнет. Дима отдыхает сейчас.
It's the LNG terminals which we have built with the South Korean help. It's actually called
Жозе тоже отдыхает.
Independence. It's in Klaipėda, the biggest port of Lithuania. It's a $1 billion huge ship, and that ship can actually, take that LNG gas and then distribute it in the three countries. And actually, its capacity is such that it can provide some gas, some American gas, to
Слава Украине,
the Polish
Богданчику.
users as well, to the part of Poland. So these things can be done if we as Europeans are smart, if we think strategically, if we plan in advance,
главное
if we
отдать
know
англосаксам
who are our
им,
friends,
чем вам
who are
продать.
our real partners, and who is
Чат
our
читаю пока
strategic
что.
enemy.
С кем он разговаривает? Я
It's
читаю чат.
obvious
С
for
микрофоном там
people
везде
who live
какой-то
in
номер.
Finland or the Baltic
Генеральный
states or
обслуг.
other Scandinavian countries. Russia is no friend of ours. Russia has
Ну,
been
вы вообще
doing
никого
it
не
for
выбирали
many,
25
many
лет уже.
decades, you can say centuries, really causing havoc in our countries, causing misery, causing
разум и
occupations
сила.
and deportations to Siberia. So
Разом нас
it's just
богато.
has no logic if there are alternatives to get your products, including your energy,
с вами уже
your
все
gas,
торговали.
your electricity,
Вы уже с
and your
Европой
oil from
торговали.
other parts of the world.
Ничего не
This is what
получилось, как
we
видите.
should be doing. And these three small countries have
Барик,
shown
он тебе
that that's
рассказывает.
possible to do.
Учи
I just
английский,
finally
пригодится.
would like to add something. The third anniversary of this wretched war is
Про
approaching.
праправнуков
And
не
in my
думай.
country, Lithuania,
Думай
there
о
is a
себе,
huge fundraiser
красавчик.
going on already for several weeks, and it will continue up until the 24th. It's called Radarom. It's like let's buy
Голосуйте у меня здесь. Опрос идет. Откуда вы? Грефия, Украина, Казахстан или другое?
Tens of thousands of euros, hundreds of thousands,
Плюс,
actually
ну,
millions.
приезжай,
It's well over a
засунь
million right now. We are not a big nation, but
Воин.
a lot of people and a lot of small organizations or small companies are donating. And the idea is really whatever we can do to help Ukraine with moral support, with economic support, and yes, with military support, this is what we should be doing, because this is the way to guarantee not just Ukraine's survival and,
Орешник
security
быстрее
and
встретит
future prosperity,
Курская
but this
область.
is the only way to guarantee all European security in the long term.
Что за хуйня происходит? Николай Краснодар, мы сейчас делим русские земли. Тебе Краснодар, кстати, недавно прилетело.
Is just somewhere in the eastern regions, eastern oblasts of Ukraine, and is not touching us. That person is really profoundly
Хорошо, что
wrong.
продал.
We are talking just
Есть
2,
покупатель, есть
3,
продавец.
4 hour
Главное, вам не
flight
продали.
from here, from London, or
Да,
just
выберем между
1.5 hour flight from places like Vienna, and you are there, you are in Ukraine. So Ukraine
вы
is
еще тоже не выиграли.
an essential, crucial part of Europe, and that's where the future of this continent is being decided right now. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
Yeah, come on, man. Thank you very much, Nikos. How are you, my friend? Having a nice day. Well, once again, my friend, once again, I can't answer a question I can't hear. I'm sure everyone knows this, but we need to be able to hear the question properly, so we can answer. If anyone has a question, please go ahead and ask it.
The point was about Palestine.
About Palestine, oh lovely, lovely. You know what, my friends? I think it would be a great idea for us to just leave our rally and go to a completely different rally, of a completely different cause, and start pestering them. Oh, you know, why don't you support
Моя родина,
Ukraine?
вы
How come you don't
оккупировали мою
support
родину.
Ukraine? It would be such
10
a
лет уже
good
в
service
оккупации
for our
моей
cause, man. It would look so great for everyone. I'm being sarcastic, of course. We don't do that for a reason. And the reason is because that's a very, very lowbrow move to try to, guilt trip people by going to their rallies and start complaining, oh, why aren't you supporting our rallies? Very, very low move. The people who support us, they come here and they show support. The people who we support, we come there and we
Так.
show support.
Брюс
And for
отдыхает.
those who have not voiced their opinion, well, that's fine. They can live their own lives. They can have their own points to give. But keep in mind, my friends, that George Galloway and Jeremy Corbyn, you know what their opinion is about all of these different causes. And they have been virulently pro-Russia all the time. Every single time the conversation goes around Ukraine, they are pro-Russian. Of course, Jeremy Corbyn at least, he has enough wit to not say it openly. But George Galloway, he's basically as good as admitted that he's pro-Russian. Doesn't even matter. Some other people include Diane Abbott and certain other individuals. The unions, there you go.
Gal čia lietuvių yra.
You know, my friends, needs to be said
Jeigu
again
yra
and
lietuvių,
again and
pasakykit.
again. The failed ideologies of the past have failed
Краснодар к тебе
for a
прилетела
reason,
на прошлой неделе.
because they don't
Я
work.
думаю, это не последний
You know,
раз.
we hear this being said very often. That wasn't real socialism. We hear that very often. It's a stupid saying, my friends. We need to move on. Imagine the Nazis coming out to the street and saying, oh, that wasn't real Nazis. What? Nazis has only been tried once. How can you know it's wrong? That's a stupid point, my friends. We can't be listening to people like that. We can't be listening to them at all. We need to think rationally. If it failed in the past and failed miserably and millions of people died, well, there's a very good chance that it was a failed ideology to begin with. Let's just say that. But alas, we will continue, my friends.
Gal yra lietuvių
Because
čia,
there's a
gal
lot
žiūrit
to be
transliaciją.
said.
Kas nors
We
iš
need to say
Lietuvos.
it, or else many people may never know. So, as me and Vitas, as we said, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they
Так.
cut themselves
Наш
from Russian
конвой
electricity. Now they are
идет
fully cut off.
отдыхать.
Independent, you could say. Now, will they freeze? Will they go dark at night? They won't. All that's going to happen is that now they're going to get their energy elsewhere. Which is exactly what should have happened in the rest of Europe also. My friends, when the Russian terrorist regime collapses, then we
Саша,
can
задай
start
еще раз
thinking
вопрос, я не успел
about
прочитать.
trading Russian gas, trading Russian oil. Then we can start thinking about that. But at this moment, all of those resources are being weaponized by Russia.
Ukraine.
Which leads me to another point. Sometimes people foolishly assume that we just hate the Russian language and all of that. My friends, there's still a lot of people speaking Russian in Ukraine. Do you see them being persecuted? I certainly don't. They aren't being persecuted. That's the reason. They never were being persecuted. But that didn't stop Putin from making up excuses. That didn't stop Putin from weaponizing the Russian language and use it as one of his reasons for invading Ukraine. Now, what was that his real reason for invading Ukraine? No. Was religion his reason for invading
Саша,
Ukraine?
какая
No.
национальная
Was
ненависть? Вы нас
ethnicity
бомбите
his reason for invading
1100
Ukraine?
дней.
No.
Нам молчать,
None of
стоять,
those were real
бояться,
reasons. They
спрятаться.
were all made
Вы,
up.
Саша, ты
There was
лично
one
бомбишь
reason
Украину
why
и
Putin
украинцев
invaded
более
Ukraine,
1000
and that
дней.
reason was because he felt like there would be no accountability. He felt empowered to invade Ukraine, and he wanted to do it in that window of time,
Ты 25 лет голосовал за Путина, и ты спонсор этой войны. Ты вышел на улицу, ты сказал «стоп войне».
the free world. I'd like to mention a little something that Vitaly told me about all the bots in the comments. Very funny stuff. Very funny stuff. You know, they were asking, oh, how are the Ukrainians going to pay for all of those loans, for all that money, for all that aid? It's very simple, my friends. You are going to pay. It's the Russians who are going to pay. It's the Russophiles who are going to pay. Because there are billions of frozen Russian assets in Western banks that can all be used for a good cause. And some of that money has already been used for a good cause. The interest of those funds, of all that money, the interest has already been used.
Discussion about international law.
Exactly. There's already been a discussion about using the rest of that money, not just the interest. The interest is already being used. How about that? Did those, bots on the other side, did they know about this? I can bet money that they didn't. The Russian money is being used to pay for Ukraine's weapons. Thanks. Now, my friends, sarcasm aside, this is true. However, it should have been long
Украина не входила в НАТО, и ее никто туда не приглашал и не брал.
Because Russia has violated every agreement it has made with Ukraine and with the free world. There should be no reason why the free world should be bound to any of its agreements to Russia. No more playing around with the rules.
Никто в Украину не брал в НАТО, и в Конституцию прописали только тогда, когда вы отобрали Крым и напали на Донбасс.
Russia cannot be trusted. Russia cannot be reasoned with. Russia cannot be negotiated with. The only kind of negotiations that can be had with Russia are negotiations from a position
Дима,
of
приедь и
strength.
сломай ему
Where you
микрофон.
tell Russia,
Иван.
do this, and they do it. That's the only kind of negotiations we can have. And hopefully that's what Trump is going to do. Now Trump has improved his rhetoric substantially. He doesn't always say the right thing, but hopefully he's going to do the right thing. He has sent a very good tweet not too long ago though, where he said specifically
А ты
that
хотел,
Russia is
чтобы
running a
Украине никто не
fuse,
помогал?
and that he's actually going
Киев
to
за
do
3
them a
дня?
favor by making this deal happen. Now, for those who haven't realized it, that is a thinly veiled threat to Russia.
Да, в России тоже есть нацистские высказывания.
You guys, you can't go on much longer with this. Take the deal
Даже в
or
вашей
be undone.
Венгрии, которая
Wonder
вас
what the bots think
поддерживает,
about that.
тоже есть нацисты.
But my friends,
На стороне российской
I would
армии
like to
воюют
speak
нацисты.
a little bit about politics.
Есть большая группа
There's a
нацистов
myriad
в
of
Сербии.
political ideologies in this world. All of them can never be counted. There's a myriad of them, huge amount of different opinions, different philosophies. I would like to speak mostly about a certain dichotomy, a certain relation between two different worldviews.
В 2003 или 2005 году Россия была партнером НАТО, и Путин хотел вступить в НАТО. Почему вы не спрашивали разрешения у Украины?
One country that's near a country with a completely different political worldview, they cannot coexist well. There will be problems, there will be war. Now, political realism sees the world differently. It sees
Where
the world
is
as
this?
chaos.
Russia? No, this
And in
is
that
London.
chaos, states
Да,
are
разрешение
rational
Украины, когда
actors.
вы давали свои базы для
And if presented
Ульяновске для
with the
НАТО,
proper
почему,
incentives for
когда вы
peace,
хотели вступить
then
в НАТО,
peace can, in
почему не
theory,
спрашивали
be maintained
у соседей
perpetually.
разрешения?
The political idealists have a different view. The only way for peace to be maintained perpetually is to achieve that peace via political alignment. Now, sometimes that alignment can only be achieved with war. This is the big difference between the two. But nowadays, political realism has truly and completely been bastardized. Nowadays, we hear
Да,
all of these
Иран
Russophiles,
помогает
like
России,
near
и
China,
Северная Корея
spread
помогает
this
России.
idiotic idea
Плюс
that,
Китай
oh,
помогает
we just need
России.
to let Russia
И с
have what it
этими
wants,
странами
because
борется
all
Украина.
countries are political actors and they're all reasonable actors. Now that is the stupidity of modern day political realism. To believe that every country is a reasonable actor. Let me ask you guys something. Imagine this situation. Every single one of us has a spot of land on this specific place here. Every single one of us believes that all the others are reasonable. They're sane human beings that can be spoken to, that can be negotiated with, that will be incentivized to keep their promises if there are consequences to breaking those promises. Think about this for a second. If one of us starts breaking those promises left, right, and center, and all the others do nothing to punish him for all of those transgressions, is it more realistic to believe that they will keep going and keep breaking those rules? Or is it more realistic to believe that they will suddenly stop because they are getting some concessions from all of us? My friends, Russia has proven again and again and again once more that it is not a reasonable political actor worldwide, that it is not an entity that can be trusted, that can be negotiated with. Plenty of times they have proved that they are abusers, that they are trying their best to use this stupid loophole in the mentality of the free world, that they believe, they don't understand Russia. That's why they believe that if they give some gifts to Russia, they give some benefits, a few concessions here and there, that Russia, oh, all of a sudden Russia's going to be content. They're not going to be content with anything. They're going to continue. They saw the loophole through political realism, and they're exploiting it left, right, and center. That's why modern day political realism is dead.
Молчанов, ты
It was
тут?
dead with the Soviet Union.
Молчанов, ты смотришь нас?
But alas, many people do not understand this. Many people here near Scheimer prance around in his pseudo-intellectual talks, saying that, oh, you know, Ukraine...
НАТО не брало Украину. Не было таких планов. И в Украине никто не хотел в НАТО до 2014 года.
No, my friends. NATO's fault is something different. NATO's fault is not allowing Ukraine to join it long ago when it first tried. That is the real criticism we have for NATO. And the best case scenario to end this war and to finally have peace in Europe is as follows, my friends. Ukraine in NATO!
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 Now, my friends, I don't see myself as a political idealist or a liberalist, although I'm trash talking the realists so much. That doesn't mean I only have good things to say about the political idealists. In fact, I would actually make the very controversial point that the Russian regime right now is a little bit closer to political idealism than it is to realism. Let me explain that one. The Russian terrorist regime functions with an idea that they are powerful. They're not functioning with reality. They're not working with what they see, what's visible to all of us. They're not working with reason. They are not a reasonable political actor, and they have not been for a very long time, perhaps ever since the beginning of Russian history, when the Soviet Union collapsed. That wasn't the actual beginning of Russian history, but I mean of Russia outside of the Soviet Union. That's what I mean. What's happening now, my friends, is that the Russian terrorist regime has created a post-truth society within their borders. And they are trying to spread this post-truth society outside of their borders. In other words, they're trying to make sure that the countries around them align politically with their own views. So my friends, it's too late for political realism now. We have to fight fire with fire. We have to see the Russian terrorist regime as an entity beyond negotiations, beyond reason, an entity that needs to be put down.
Ничего не блокировал.
Типа у
Just
тебя я
like
обычно не
Nazi Germany
очень
was
в чате, но
denazified,
сегодня прям
Russia
вообще
needs to be
пиздец.
de-Russified. Many nations of Russia that have been enslaved by the Muscovites need to be freed, including the millions of Ukrainians who live in Russia. Let's not forget about that. Let's not forget about raspberry Ukraine, green Ukraine, yellow Ukraine, and gray Ukraine. Areas of Russia who the Ukrainian ethnic
Где донаты,
minority
чат?
are
Где
actually
вопрос
majority in
нормальный?
those specific parts. They're a minority in Russia as a whole, but they're a majority in those specific places.
Кто кинет донат, Павел зачитает и ответит на вопрос.
Terrorist regime around. One of these days, perhaps Ukraine should invade Russia and liberate all of those ethnic Ukrainians. I mean, it's the same argument they made. But you know what, my friends? Ukraine never thought about doing it. For the simple reason that Ukraine never wanted war.
Ответы за
A
донаты,
country
да.
that gives us the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world and dismantles its weapons.
Давай, Саша,
It
накинь
can never be
$2, и мы
blamed of
прочитаем
being
твои.
bloodthirst, of wanting war. That's a country that clearly is making a move towards peace. Actions speak louder than words, my friends. And that is what we should pay heed to. I'd like to remind you all, my friends, that our rallies happen here at 10 Downing Street on Wednesdays at 6, on Fridays at 6, and on Sundays at 3 o'clock. On 24th this month, February, we're going to have a large event happening over there in Trafalgar Square at around 6 o'clock. So you're all invited to come there. And after 24th February, we will only have rallies on Wednesdays and on Sundays. No more Fridays after 24th February. Please remember that so that you do not come here for no reason. Of course, you can still come here if you like, but be warned. And now, my friends, we're going to have a short musical break.
Максим, мочи русню. Героям слава!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Нашим славним захисникам і захисницям тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ladies and gentlemen, Ukraine is at the historical crossroads. For the first time in recent history, Ukraine stands a chance to become absolutely independent, sovereign nation, not only de jure, but de facto. This path has started a long ago. In the 17th century, under the pressure from their neighbors Turkey and Poland, Ukraine had to made their own choice. Ukrainians made a misstep. They signed a military pact with Russia to get support against
English.
Poland and Turkey, with whom Ukraine was at war at the time. The fact which later Russia misrepresented. It misrepresented it to the point where it stated, well, the Ukrainians signed agreement to become part of Russia. And that's where all Russian ideology stems from. Ukrainians have had an independent state for centuries before that. Ukrainians were fighting for independence after that. Their latest attempt was done in early 20th century after the great October Russian coup, when the Tsar was deposed and later on democratically elected government was deposed by communists and Russia went downhill. Ukrainians started their own state at the time. Unfortunately, Ukrainians were not strong enough. Ukrainians were divided, and Ukrainians didn't have support of the outside world who was involved in the First World War and paid little attention to the nation of Ukraine. Russia made a huge effort and managed to conquer Ukraine one more time. As you see, Russia showed its terrorist core even then, because Russia is a terrorist state.
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 The whole history of Russia is living proof of it. After Ukrainians were defeated in 1918-1920, Russia
Андрей Новоселов, денежка
taken out his
USAID.
guild.
Единая Россия начинала с этих денежек. Они участвовали в этой USAID. Так что кто еще отрабатывает денежки американские?
Ukrainian independence through repressions in early 20s, through Holodomor in 30, 32, 33. Russia has wiped out Ukrainian elite. Russia has wiped out the best Ukrainian farmers and then took over the land. Ukrainians lost its political elite. Ukrainians lost its ideological elite. But we are a very resilient nation and we came back. We came back fighting during World War II when Ukrainians again started fight for their independence against first Nazi Germany and later on Soviet Union. Soviet Union came back in force. They again repressions against civilian population, repressions against anyone who would say anything about Ukrainian independence or about being pro-Ukrainian. a lot of people have died in Siberia. Russia used the same terrorist tactics then as it used before, because Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Again, Ukraine's struggle has not ended in the late 40s, early 50s. In 70s,
Кстати, ботики, вот спикер, у него сын имеет русский паспорт Российской Федерации.
У
спикера.
Pushing for Ukrainian language, for Ukrainian culture, under Soviet regime, which
не все за вашего
was
Путина.
trying to stamp it out.
Ботики.
And still Ukrainians came back and Ukrainians fought. A lot of them were sent to Gulag, a lot of them were sent to Siberia, a lot of them died like Vasil Stus, but they persevered, which ended in 1991 with the fall of Soviet Union and Ukraine obtaining de jure independence. However, Ukraine has been under Soviet Russia for too long. Russians have installed a lot of their own puppets. They brought a lot of cultural Russian traits like corruption. And therefore, Ukraine had hard times getting from de facto Russian occupation. Because Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
But Ukrainians kept on fighting. Let's think about Maidan 2003,
Андрей, ты должен подписаться на нас.
Maidan 2014. The war which started in 2014. This is all Ukraine
Ильнар
tried to shake
Садриев,
off
ассалам алейкум.
Russian
НАТО нападает, иди, спасай Донбасс.
and which ended up with full-scale Russian invasion in 2022. Everyone said Ukraine will be done in 3 days, maximum 2 weeks. But it's 3 years on, and Ukraine is still fighting. And who's going to
Саша
fight? We
Шатилов
fight Russia
идет
because
отдыхать.
Russia is a terrorist state! Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
This is the message that the world should get. We see that Europeans are getting it finally. States under Trump, we don't know that.
Ильнар, нам покажешь, как надо говорить на английском? Салам алейкум, брат. Сколько палестинцев принял у себя в городе?
It's paid in blood. It's paid in lives. All this fight started from the 17th century, the 19th century, 20th century, Maidan, and this freaking war is paid by Ukrainian lives. Lives of our soldiers, lives of civilians, lives of our children.
Вы платили деньги, чтобы тот человек ходил в колготках.
For a minute of
За ваши
silence
деньги он ходил в
to
колготках.
honor those who paid with their lives for Ukrainian independence and Ukrainian future. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Нашим славним захисникам і захисницям тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Russia is a terrorist state, and as a terrorist state, it's quite unstable. Russia has fallen apart several times over the last century. First time after a great Russian coup in 1917. Second time after World War I. Second time after collapse of Soviet Union in 1991. And now it's on the verge of doing the same. It's on the verge of doing the same, and this time Ukrainians are bringing that down. It just needs a little bit, a little nudge, a little push, just a little bit more time, and it will collapse onto itself. And all Ukraine needs to do is survive one day longer. In order to, what can Western nations do? How can they help? Besides providing Ukraine with military
В
assistance.
Украине каждый второй говорит на русском языке. Проблем никаких нет. Он не запрещен.
Sanctions which do work. No trade with Russia! 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 Because Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
More sanctions on Russia!
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 Sanctions do work! Sanctions do work! At the
Халид
beginning of war- of the
Диченко.
war,
Почему у тебя
no one
украинская
could
фамилия?
think
У
that's
тебя
what,
отец
Russia was
украинец.
founded on. No one could think that Europe can live without Russian gas. Russian gas was about 60% of what Europe consumed. Nowadays, it's under 10%. Under 10%. Down from 60%.
Халид Диченко.
Is
Ты
it, was it
Иуда
possible? Yes. Why
или как?
wasn't it done earlier? That's the question. Why wasn't it done after Russia occupied Crimea? That would have prevented this war.
Нет, твой отец не славянин, он украинец. Диченко – это украинская фамилия.
A lot of oil being sold, and gasoline that we are buying today, or a diesel fuel we are buying today in the United Kingdom has part of Russian oil in it. And this oil is
Славянин нет
with
такой
Ukrainian
национальности.
blood and with Ukrainian
Ты не стыдись
blood.
своих корней,
Stop buying
украинец.
Russian gas! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian oil!
Диченко, ты Иуда, предатель своих корней и дедов.
Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian gas!
Диченко, украинец, покинь этот чат.
Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian oil!
Диченко, украинец, ты Иуда, ты продажная шкура.
Have been asking for long-range missiles all over the world because we wanted to stop Russian aggression at the place of its origin on Russian territory. But the aid was very little. Germans refused to provide them altogether. Americans were sending them. Britain sent the first ones, which we are extremely grateful for, that it wasn't enough. Ukrainians managed to develop long-range drone capability. And while in 2023, Ukraine was producing 50 a month. In 2025, we are producing 500 a month, and that shows. How does it show? Ukraine is imposing its own sanctions on Russian oil and gas industry. Ukraine is reaching deep in Russian territory and destroying Russian oil
Лена,
refineries.
читай
It's
каждую
destroying
букву от Максима.
Russian
Он
oil
плохого не напишет.
storage facilities. It's destroyed Russian gas facilities.
Славянин нету такое, участник СВО, составьте Вагнера. Ты, Диченко, террорист, и ты предатель Родины. Ты предал свой украинский род, своего отца и деда.
Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian gas!
Вагнер – террористическая организация.
Russian oil! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian gas! Stop buying Russian oil! Stop buying Russian oil! More sanctions on Russia! More sanctions!
Кракен – это защитники своей родины.
More sanctions on Russia! More sanctions on Russia! More sanctions on Russia!
Азовсталь – это то, что вы разбомбили.
Russia is a terrorist state! 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 And therefore we can afford
Вы бомбили Азовсталь больше месяца.
no trade with Russia! 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 And as a result, Russia with drop in income from gas and oil, with lack of labor force because a lot of skilled labor went to the front lines and many of them were killed, with rampant inflation, which is very high in double digits, held about 20%.
Лена, на коленях только русские просят у своего президента то, что должно быть. Того, чего у них нет. Это только русские могут стоять на коленях. Просить воду, дороги, медицину, школу, образование.
Which is already flooded with the liquid Russian government bonds, which will trigger collapse of the banking system. And the next Russian economic crisis will be slashed. Why? Because Russia is filled with hate. Level of hate in that society is unprecedented. That society is held together by hate. Not only to Ukrainians, they hate each other. There are conflicts, inter-regional conflicts, conflicts across regions, religious conflicts, conflicts between native Russians and the people who came in from neighbor Central Asian countries. There are so many conflicts within Russia that when those hundreds of thousands of soldiers come back home with a level of hate even above the hate of average Russians who have been dignified, who can use weaponry, who will bring back weapons. Just imagine what will happen in Russia then. The 90s will seem like paradise when the war is over and Russia gets back the hate it sent to Ukraine. Because Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
Russia is a terrorist state.
Russia is the terrorist state.
And as Martin Luther King said, I had a dream. I had a dream that after Russian collapse, we saw emergence of multitude, of nation states, of nations which have been under Russian oppression for hundreds of years. And as a result, a lot of them will become democratic, will choose the path, the Western path, the Central Asian path, but they will become independent, they will stop supporting Russian regime, and with the loss of those resources, with the loss of Central Asia, with the loss of Siberia, Russian hair will lose its teeth, will lose its claws, and it will become a Russian cat. Therefore, let's end this Russian terrorist state. Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
And in the end, I want to see all these Russian war criminals, all these Russian war criminals in jail. Tribunal for Russian war criminals.
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 But that's a dream. And to achieve that dream, we need to put a lot of pressure on
Дима
Russia
Лазарев,
now.
иди спасай
So what needs to be done?
Россиюшку от НАТО, которые хотят захватить твой туалет на улице.
More sanctions on Russia!
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 Stop buying Russian gas!
Stop buying Russian gas!
Stop buying Russian oil!
Stop buying Russian oil!
Stop buying Russian gas!
Stop buying Russian gas!
Stop buying Russian oil!
Stop buying Russian oil!
Stop buying Russian gas!
Stop buying Russian gas!
Stop buying Russian oil!
Stop buying Russian oil!
And never in your life forget that Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Russia is a terrorist state!
Russia is the terrorist state!
Putin!
Хуйло!
You know, my friends, there's always a lot more to say, but alas, for today, I believe our time is coming to an end. Yes, indeed, we are already past time. We don't want to upset London's finest by staying here beyond our allowed time. So, thank you all very much for coming, and we are going to end this rally as we started it with our lovely Ukrainian anthem.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття. скажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть! Смерть!
Дякую.
How did you get up here before, eh?
Oh, I don't know. It's not easy.
That's very easy. It looks like you're like blending into the statue.
This is not easy. What's happening? Red fish, blue fish.
Been a while.
Oh, you get to see it. It's probably a bit more windy as well, That's not bad, is it? It's all right. What we can do?
І кікіту карту.
Питали, Олимик.
Бачу. Ну, what you can
What?
say about Trump?
Trump Peter.
Peter? Or English?
Trump is Russian asset. Trump is Russian asset.
It's like spy? Not spy?
Spy.
Шпион.
Yes.
Шпигун.
Шпигун.
Окей. Трамп підер. Павло. А як Маск?
Маш дебил.
Дебіл. Окей. Такой же. А як мільярдер може бути дебілом? Може, так?
Коррупціонер.
Коррупція. Трамп красавчик.
В якому сенсі красавчик?
Ну от, Ніна пише, що Трамп красавчик. Потім нам пишуть, що ми...
Може вона від Путіна буде.
Ну, Маск самый богатый человек в мире.
І
Бачиш?
що?
Дебилом называют. Англия сама Не успел на русском. Бомжи. Так. Так, Владимир Путин молодец. Бачишь?
Ну, бачиш, ну.
Путин самый добрый человек. Зато Зеленский великий вождь. Зеленский это лидер украинского народа. Путин президент мира.
Русского мира.
Так, русского мира. Так, что еще? Как дела в Курахово? За деньги готовы были лизнуть. Владимир Путин наш герой. Зелю геть. Вот такие потужные боты. Так, а где наш Павло? А ну? Це вже було багато раз таким не фокусом. Але я на чому не звертаю уваги, я просто роблю свою роботу. Все. Путін самий гнилой козел.
Це правда, блін, я собі уявляю, що не можна сказати.
Потужний бот.
Вона вміє, так знаєш, але вона вже останнім часом, вона вже як приходить і так старається спокійно, без агресії, бо вона знає, якою може бути.
Где наше бабло? Наше бабло у англосаксов.
Розрізняти волонтерські проекти з роботою. Це є власне біда. Це є власне біда.
Людей вичитують за те, що вони
Бахмут, Барик, Бахмут вы уничтожили. Там жило 80 тысяч русскоязычного населения, которые ходили в православную церковь. Сейчас там живут 80 людей без света, без отопления, без электричества и без воды. Вот что с Бахмутом.
Не потрібно.
Харьков наш круглый, его надо завоевать. Тебе надо положить голову за Харьков.
Давай, папа.
Павло, хуйню почитаешь?
Ну давай, трошки хуйню почитаю. Давай, сладкий хлеб. Харков наш. Кондо уже Зеленский пошлет женщин на смерть. Что там мы починим Бахмут? Починили, да, Бахмут починять вони. Маріуполь видел. Да, розбитий дотепер, блін. А ви не бачили? І лузери останні. Уничтожили. Бахмут ви уничтожили. Хуєплети. Блін, хуєплети, це щось нове, я ж такого не чув. Хуєпльоти. Це що, плетуть щось з хуїв? От багато хуїв так що сплели з того. Це капець. Та це ви, люди, це ви всяку херню весь час плетете хуями, блін.
Хуесосы.
Хуєсоси, точно, бачиш, ти знаєш. Дрявою властю. Власть дірява, боже мій. Щоб москалі казали, що в Україні дірява власть. Оце, блін, цікаво. Оце цікаво. Слухайте, москалики, а що ваші олігархи весь час пробують полетіти з високих вікон, га? Вони що, ще не навчились? Як вони ті всі гроші заробили? Або як вони вас розікрали, якщо вони такі тупі, що не розуміють, що не полетять, а впадуть, якщо з будинка вистрибнуть, га? Ви що можете за це сказати? Откуда знаете, что на Украине вы же свалили с родины? Блін, от чувак називається русский, каже, ви откуда-то знаєте, що на Україні, ви ж свалили з родини. Чувак називає себе русский.
Так.
І він знає, що на Україні, а ми не знаємо, що в Україні, а? А це, блін, хуєсос такий смішний, що взагалі. Я тут дістаю охуїтельне удовольствие, як москалі зрозуміють. Це їхня чисто мова, блін, так помутюкатись трошки. Це чисто так росіяни розмовляють завжди. Та треба так іноді їм сказати, бо вони по-іншому не розуміють. Вони лише розуміють, якщо на них гремнути, по морді дати і матом так мутюкнутись в лице. Оце його мова. Це він, да, перніше, респект. Уважаю. Чекай, що ще? А він каже, тому що я на Україні сам, в рот вам свиньям даю. О-хо-хо-хо! Блін, він був, мабуть, відомий у дитсадку. Там, мабуть, такі угари придумав, що взагалі всі інші карапузи там від нього тікали. Блін, чухан русський, від тебе всі карапузи, мабуть, там тікають у Росії, у дитсадках. Хоча, кому я брешу, у вас же дітей ніяких нема, скоро за пару років будете вимирати.
Так.
А українці тут, за кордоном тепер, да. Іноді зустрічаємо вас тут, русофілів, час від часу. От щось починаєте говорити, тут Росія, Росія. А блін, а чого не у Росії, а? Чого не у Рашці? Така хороша Рашка, я в шоці. Чому звідти з того ангельського місця піти?
Де корупція.
Там парашка крута, там нормально. О, ви каже, хуйсоси, ви з України, дивися. Ні ти. Цікаві люди, капець. Ой, Боже, смішно. Але ти розумієш, що, Віталік, знаєш що? Ну, чекай, нормально. Знаєш, що смішно?
Так.
Оце добре так іноді трошки подивитись, розрядка, точно, але не можна аж дуже багато часу на це витрачати, бо, чесне слово, втрачаєш IQ, коли з ними тут говориш. Чесне слово. От я тут трошки почитав, блін, уже відчуваю, я дурніший став від цього фуфла. Оце я навіть не можу аж так винити тих росіянів у Росії, бо, блін, з цими хуєсосами поговориш 5 хвилин, неандерталом станеш. Це я ж в шоці, блін, я і на собі це відчуваю. От капець, Две, ще один тут ідіот. Давайте не пішдіть завтра жопу витирати своїм зозяїном. Боже мій, по-російськи не вмію писати. Я русский.
А ще других учать.
Я не вмію писати. Боже.
What's his name? Shaman.
Да, смішні ви люди, блін, смішні люди. Люди, навчіться, от російська мова, да, почали війну за російську мову. А вони то не вміють писати. А може б ви проти себе трошки там повоювали між собою? Ну там з Пригожиним вже майже це й було. Скоро ще буде у вас війна в Росії, дружбани, скоро так будете воювати між собою.
Чечня проти Вагнера, Вагнер проти всіх. На Москву.
Скоро будете між собою воювати, ми ще це побачимо. Ми ще це все будемо бачити і так будемо нормально угорати тут над цим всім. Ще будемо, не переймайтесь, ми ще скинемо там гроші і зброю тим сепаратистам Росії, що скоро будуть існувати там. Не переймайтесь.
Білгородська народна.
Каже, як то 95-й квартал, блін. Смішний, блін. Сміхованець. Дивись, яких сміхованці тут показались. Слухайте, люди, а ви що, з окопів нам пишете, чи що? Це смішні взагалі хуєсоси тут. З окопів, всі російські патріоти нам з окопів пишуть. У них нема що робити, крім того, щоб діставати українські дрони в бошку і писати тут онлайн. Чекай, що ще? Жалко кого? Клоунів? Да. Це, знаєте що, я закінчую розмову одною піснею з фільму «Зелений слонік». Чекай, чи я пам'ятаю, чи я згадаю нормально пісню. Та-та-ра-та-ра-та, 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 та-та-та. Зеленый слоник нам в оркестр пришел, зеленый слоник нас трубу принес. Когда ребята уходили, зеленый слоник на трубе играл про то, как плохо в клетке жить, как плохо есть проклятую еду, как плохо всем, а хуже всего ему, зеленому слонику. От таке ваше життя, люди. Як там у цього поїхавшого у зеленому слоніку жрете гівно день і ніч. Кажете, що сладкий хліб. От тут нам кажете, продаєте свій сладкий хліб, блін. Знаєте, що з цим всім зробіть, блін? От подивіться зелений слонік і потім подивіться на ваше життя. І знайдіть 10 розбіжностей. Я вам гарантую, що не знайдете ні одної. Але поки пельмешки з гівном і водочка є, то ви нічого не бачите.
Бояришник.
Давай. Папа, Віталік.
Ага, дякую. Ну як вас? Вилічив, Павло? Или еще больные? Ебать,
То не виліковно, лиш могила вилічить.
Так, горбатова могила
Сміттєвий
исправить.
цей пакет чорний.
Цыгане. О, цыгане.
Ми цигани вже. Блін, а ну покажи мене, а ну покажи. А ну покажи мене. Привіт, я циган.
Павло цыган.
Я циган. I'm a gypsy, bro. I'm the new gypsy king.
Ми йдемо в
Де
Агаван.
Янис?
Бля, Янис. Вилос Янис. Блядь.
Та це його херня, ні?
Так це теж.
Бля, ти його всю херню взяв. Взяв шот.
Так, зробить суржик давай. Пошел из Европы.
О, його телефон всередині.
Янис, this one?
I think he's, no, I think Янис is coming.
А, во, вон Янис. Я бачу його. На этом. Во, Янис.
Oh yeah, that's him, yeah, he's coming, yeah.
Иван, пиши по-русски, без ошибок.
Мама.
Опа, менты. Дима, это за вами приехали. Сидит около полиции, сыт, что нет.
Прийшов піцу, скуштував, їбуча піца.
Ладно,
Дивись, у нас куча людей. Куча людей прийшло. Раз, два, три, чотири.
5 минут.
Де твої рюкзак?
Yeah. We're coming to this one.
Pavlo.
Russian troops out solidarity with Ukraine.
That wasn't me. But
It's 3 meetings. Sunday, Saturday and Monday. Та не усі будуть Uno грати. 2-3 заходи, потім половина уйде.
Ну, побачимо.
На розогрів можемо пограти.
Ще кажуть ці хуєсоси твої,
Так.
Ще дотепер говорять, блін, там в окопах ніхрен що робити їм. Всі з окопів пишуть, я в шоці.
Перерыв у них. Какая война? А кто
Какая война?
кокс снюхивать будет?
Що?
Кокс.
А
Кокаїн.
ні, я знаю. Ні, ну він що, має на увазі, що нема війни ніякої? Це взагалі.
А, типа не буде війни, не буде кокса. А
Я
зараз,
не знаю, я не
зараз
знаю.
всі гроші йдуть на кокс.
Це якийсь, блін, поїхавший ще один.
Успели границу пересечь.
Успели.
А мы за границей уже долго. Полки, язык, хрю-хрю.
Ми всі там втекли з України, правда?
А ти
Всі з України
по-польськи
втекли.
балакаєш?
Я ніколи не говорив, ні, не вмію.
Польська
Я
мова.
взагалі там не близько до Польщі.
Там румунський, так?
Ближче до Румунії, але я по-румунськи нічого не вмію казати. Я не вмію по-румунськи говорити. Там ніхто не вчить по-румунськи говорити, блін. Ну я знаю тут деяких лохів певних, які всяку херню онлайн говорять.
Щас
А давай вже закінчимо,
Да,
щоб
будемо
вони
закінчувати.
зараз будуть знати, куди ми йдемо, блін. Прийде вся параша тут разом.
Мразі, піп, вам в аду гореть.
Піп? Ну, яке піп?
Йобаний.
Мотикнувся.
Матюкнувся. Так.
Що матюкаєшся, сука, точно. Правильно.
Настоящие патриоты, как запахло жареным, сразу лыжи намазали.
Блін, ти знаєш, це мене просто шокує. От кожного разу, що хтось щось сказує за Україну, то одразу патріот мусить бути.
Так,
А
так.
що, не може таке бути, що людина просто-напросто знає, що відбувається?
Так,
От для них це неможливо. Якщо ти знаєш, що відбувається, все, це пізда повна. Це не знаю, що відбувається.
для них вони політикою не інтересуються.
А, точно, якщо ви всі не інтересуєтесь політикою, то чого ви тут говорите?
Ну.
Оце так, знаєш, а ну чекай, я на кінець одну історію
Давай.
ще скажу. Знаєте, люди, от я прийшов на день похорону Навального, ну тут його не хоронили, але тут якби поминали його, розумієте?
Так.
І прийшов один чувак, типу, підтримує Навального. Ну, більшість там людей, що прийшли, ми у них питали, вони типу Україну підтримують, да, а той один ні. Каже, ні, і звісно, що я проти України, бо я росіян, ну, по-російськи, звісно. А я його питаю, слухай, а чого ти взагалі прийшов сюди? Чого ти маєш таку думку? Ви знаєте, що він мені сказав? Чувак, який прийшов на похорон Навального, сказав мені, що він не цікавиться політикою. А я у нього питаю, блін, чоловіче, а чому ти прийшов сюди поминати мертвого політика, якщо ти не цікавишся політикою? Оце, блін, мене просто шокує. Отаке неандертальське довбойобство. Оце постійна ваша поведінка, блін. Ну, ладно. Тяжело мову слухати. Ну так не слухай, закрий вуха собі, або просто вистріли в бошку.
Там в суд уже все выучили. Все вспомнили, все начали гэкать.
Ну. Паляницю всі кажуть.
Так что, ладно, недобрые люди, пора заканчивать. Слава Україні,
Героям слава.
до побачення. Хоп,
Все.
вот так вот.